Podcasting from the beautiful state of Maine, welcome to another episode of the Learning from Leaders podcast, the show that focuses on identifying and developing the skills and behaviors that will inspire, empower, and compel others to follow your lead. Listen as Patrick's guests talk about the powerful leadership approaches they have identified and developed, which are vital for leading in today's challenging times. These are the same approaches that will positively impact you as a leader too. Learning from Leaders provides the right balance of leadership research with real-world scenarios, making it easy for you to rise above your best. All right, let's start the show. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Learning from Leaders podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please feel free to rate, review, and subscribe on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate that effort. Until next time, keep rising above your best as a leader.
Rich, I want to thank you for taking the time to be on the podcast today. We've been working to set this up for so long and had such great conversations around your depth in HR, your experience in terms of many of the companies you've worked for. You are, as I look at your background right now, known as the HR guy. Love that. And I thought this was a great opportunity for you to come on and talk about really some things that I think are very relevant in the workplace right now. One is culture as it relates to remote virtual settings, as well as psychological safety. It's something that I certainly have been thinking about much more of lately. And I'd love your input on it and thoughts as it relates to the virtual setting that we're in as well. So I'll let you take it from here in regards to giving the audience a snapshot on your background.
Thanks, Patrick. Great to be here. And yeah, I've been truly blessed to help some leading companies as a human resources and an employee relations professional. I'm fortunate to build both the Home Depot and Lowe's, Circuit City, and also the Penske organizations, all terrific organizations. Then I've met and worked with an incredible quantity of leaders. But yeah, my focus has been on, the employee experience, from hire to retire, employee engagement, helping leaders become better leaders, and also being able to help people, with their careers along the way. So I've enjoyed it. Seen some terrific cultures along the way, and again, some awesome leaders.
Now, I will also mention fellow Rotarian, right?
Yes, I'm proud to be a member of Rotary International. I'm in Central Virginia. I'm an area governor. I'm a past president, and just last week I was installed as the district membership chair. So Rotary, we continue to do some terrific things locally within our communities, and we continue to do some terrific things internationally. So thank you for that, Patrick.
Sure. So as we jump into this year has obviously been, as you and I had conversations before we started the recording here, of how challenging this has been, right? A year like nobody would ever have thought about happening, where so many people now might be working remotely. It's not that easy, especially when we're talking about if you're onboarding people, how do you create culture in that environment?
It is a huge challenge. For so many years, we're used to meeting people face to face, having formal meetings, group meetings, having informal, one-on-ones, the infamous, water cooler chat, and those things have gone away. It feels like we're in an employment culture, kind of with an asterisk next to it. It is very, very different, very, very challenging. And look, the opportunity to help people, inspire people, do the best possible work, it just got tougher in the last 12 months. And the future leads us to believe that we will continue to be in a somewhat virtual environment or a hybrid environment for quite some time.
Yeah. So if you're working with individuals in terms of, let's just start with onboarding, right? Now we're onboarding potentially remotely, which is even more difficult, right? How do you create a sense of culture when the person doesn't even have the ability to walk past a water cooler, right? They're at home.
Absolutely. So pre-COVID, if the onboarding looked like a combination of one-on-ones, meet and greets, group meetings, meet this department staff, do the proverbial e-learnings. The most important part of that was frankly, the one-on-ones and meeting people face-to-face, so you don't have that. My take is, fortunately, the clarity of the virtual environment, if it's Zoom, if it's Microsoft Teams, my advice, utilize the virtual environment with the face-to-face. Yeah, we're going to always have that phone, but I got to tell you, being able to look at somebody in a screen and commune with them in a video screen versus just talking to them over the telephone, I think can make a big difference. The other thing is, overcoming that lack of face-to-face, the water cooler chat. Hey, I'm taking you to lunch tomorrow on your first day on the job. Great. You just need to work harder. I believe you need to increase the quantity of face-to-face to help compensate for the lack of the, physical working together.
Yeah, which is difficult in I think some settings that I'm experiencing where people feel, a couple of the terms that I've heard is Zoomitis, and the other is people on meetings they call zombies. Right? Instead of zombies, they're zombies, right? That people just become, it's not using the technology too much, right?
I agree, and I've heard those well. And I'm fortunate to be a speaker as well. Being a speaker, it's actually it's very difficult. It's very taxing. You're up there, you're captivating. You got to work hard to, scan the room, to captivate every member of the audience. That takes work. And look, when in our one-on-one or meeting interactions, I think it behooves each of us to work a little harder to make sure we are captivating and ensuring that the message is getting across. Because Patrick, to your point, you might be speaking somebody in a business situation with an employment, and that might be their 8th Zoom call, of the day, and they might be, drooling on their desk, just out of boredom. So again, we have to work a little harder to captivate people, to enhance our message on the Zoom virtual meetings.
You bring up a great point when you talk about speaking, right? We both do public speaking. One of the things is when you're out in front of an audience, right, you have the ability to engage and energize people, and you're standing up, you're walking around, you're moving. Are there components of that maybe we should try and employ as we're on Zoom calls? Maybe it's standing up for some Zoom calls and you sit down for others. I know when I generally am doing some recordings, I will try and stand up when I do them so that it presents itself more as though I'm sort of speaking to a group, just like I wouldn't be sitting in a chair when I speak to them, even though we're doing this in chairs.
Patrick, I agree with you. You need to break up the traditional rhythm, welcoming everybody. You received a copy of the agenda. We'll be here for the next hour. Let's dive into the first topic on the agenda. You really do need to break it up. It's got to feel different. Otherwise, captivating the group, captivating half of them may not happen.
Yeah. And it is much harder to be on Zoom than it is to be speaking on stage, because it's much easier to gauge the audience in terms of where they are. Whereas this, sometimes you feel like you're on your own. You don't get a feeling for how things are landing for people. It is more challenging. As we sort of move on, this conversation around the water cooler, how important that is. What about companies that are trying to maintain a culture virtually? And I would guess there probably are some individuals that say our culture wasn't that great, that we're not in that situation. But for those that do, how do you do that virtually? Any thoughts?
Sure. And the water cooler is a great example. I had a former business partner, and he had a frame photo in his office. And the photo is the very famous picture of Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt on the World War II peace talks. And the photographer caught the three of them laughing, grinning at the same time. And the caption for that picture was, "Don't ever underestimate the power of a little chat." Now, I got to tell you, in my experience, those little chats, if it's the water cooler, if it's the coffee, if it's the, "Hey, come on in here," and in my office, and I grab a marker and we start scribbling on the whiteboard, a new concept, and we move with it, and it helps the company become more effective. So those things are very, very challenging in this virtual world. I think leaders need to increase the opportunity of people to speak one-on-one. Companies have an open door policy. Now it's a little different because in the past, people could say, "Hey, you got a minute? Hey, this wasn't not a huge deal, but since you're walking by, can I bounce something off you?" Those things are gone. The physical presence of leaders, the physical presence of your boss, not seeing your boss, every day, it's tough to overcome. So I guess from a leadership standpoint, my hope is that people are spending more time one-on-one with their direct reports. They're finding excuses to give their direct reports a call, say, "Hey, how's it going? I need your help on something," work together, and then follow up by saying, "Hey, what can I do for you?" So I think it's increasing the one-on-one time.
Yeah, that is such a great point too. You're right, where the efficiencies are much more challenged today, where you could be walking down the hall and you address an issue just on the walk. You don't need to set an appointment, where there's more work involved now, right? That you actually have to almost schedule all of that time. Be much more aware of making that happen, I think, from a leadership perspective of doing those things. On a different level, even some of my coaching that I do now with individuals has changed. It's shorter bursts because I know how busy they are on Zoom, where that was the platform that I used for a lot of my clients. Knowing that they're on Zoom all the time, what we've done is, for many of them, is we do half the original coaching time as just sort of check-ins. Where are we? So it's much more condensed. And I've found, I will tell you at this point, we're more focused when we're on the call because we know our time is shorter.
I agree, Patrick. And in fact, I think the other major hurdle for people, it's not just leaders in their role with their direct reports, it's the team members with their relationship with their leaders. We have a huge distraction in front of us in this virtual world. It's called the internet. So you're talking to somebody in a Zoom meeting or a Microsoft team meetings likely, and it could be a one-on-one in a group meeting, but you're also tied to the internet. So to think that there could be a tendency to, drift to another internet site if you're going shopping, if you're just conveniently want to check your LinkedIn page or your Facebook page, or see if you got that message from your cousin that you're waiting on. So you go over to your personal email. That is a huge distraction. So I think it's incumbent on everyone, when you're in a meeting, either a one-on-one or a group meeting, I think it's important to block out the distractions that somebody could get just by jumping onto an internet site. So yeah. Not easy. It's not easy. What's the Dow Jones doing today? What's this? What's going on with this? Very tempting just to slide over, especially after your 8th Zoom call of the day. But you got to be laser focused. You got to overcome the temptation to go surf the internet.
So wait a minute, Rich. You're telling me that some people, when they're on Zoom calls, might go to other sites?
Well, it wouldn't be, guilty as charged. So somebody mentions a really cool book on Amazon, and it seems to be bargain price at $15, and you get excited. So how many people are writing down the title of that book on their Post-it note on their desk? Maybe half. The other half are jumping on Amazon and could have ordered the book by the time the person's finished their sentence.
Yeah. So I will tell you, when I'm on larger Zoom calls, I'm trying to zone in or zoom in on people's eyes to see if I can tell if they're reading a screen other than what we're really doing. You know that they're probably on something else. And we are all guilty of that, which again, I think is much more the responsibility of the leader, once again, of making sure that when you do set up these meetings, that people feel as though this time is valuable, that you keep people included in this, which I'd like to transition over for a minute when we talk about sharing meetings, this concept of psychological safety. It's something that I know in the work that I've done and a lot of the research that I've been reading, especially lately, is how important psychological safety is. And I think even more so in the environment that we're in today over the last year, of people really being able to talk about what's going on, the challenges that they might be faced with, that I think there's a lot of concern to be able to do that.
Absolutely. And not just the virtual world we're living in, but for people in employment. We've seen a lot of companies change their products, change their services, and we've seen companies proceed to change their labor model. Fortunately, some organizations have grown their labor force due to this pandemic. Many others have lost it. It doesn't help that every week it's announced, how many thousands of job losses were reported for the prior week. So there is a fear, a natural fear of many employed people of potentially losing their jobs. But again, I think there's a lot of things that, people can do to overcome it. And I go back to the face-to-face. You mentioned looking at somebody's eyes. And think back when we were in the office environment. Look forward to seeing people. I look forward to seeing senior leaders walk by in meetings, chatting. Their eyes can really kind of demonstrate their level of excitement, their level of enthusiasm. I mean, how many times have we been in an office environment and wow, we get excited just based on a senior leader or a mid-level manager, somebody explaining something and where the project or the concept is going. We kind of lost that with the virtual world, but it's something we can overcome. Reduce the distractions, get everybody to reduce the distractions and really pay close attention to what's occurring in the virtual meetings. Yeah. So can overcome, not easy, but I believe it can be overcome.
To me, I think it's hard for leaders. I think we're expecting a lot out of leaders in this environment in that they are experiencing these things too, right? That maybe they have kids that are at home they're concerned that they're remote school and they're not really learning anything right now. And maybe they've got a spouse, significant other that's at home or maybe concerned about their job. So I think at times we think of managers or leaders as somehow they don't have the same problems as the people that report to them have. And that's one of the things that I think in regards to psychological safety as well right now is it's creating the environment for everybody. And maybe it's where the leader can take a breath and say, you know what, I'm struggling too right now. It takes vulnerability to do that, but I think it goes a long way to building an environment where everybody feels that they can talk about really the challenges that are going on.
Patrick, I agree. And I have to tell you personally, I've never met an overpaid leader. It's difficult to be a leader. They have the organization's culture that they have to live. They have to instill it. And whether that's a progressive culture, transparent, flexible, innovative, whatever the culture is, and then leading people and being consistent with their leadership style, be it a servant leader, a situational leader, empowerment, engaging, a charismatic leader, whatever type of leader. But then to your point, they also have a personal life that they're juggling, and leaders have the same potential problems that frontline employees, have with family and the environment and health issues. So, yeah, they have a lot to juggle. I look up to leaders. They have a challenge. They've always had a challenging job. I think they have a more challenging job right now, and I would still contest that there's no such thing as an overpaid leader.
Yeah. When we're talking about, again, this concept of psychological safety, companies like Google have done a lot of work in this. Their Project Aristotle is one. I've seen a lot of research. I do a fair amount of work in healthcare. Specific to healthcare, there's research in regards to psychological safety talking about how when people don't feel as though there is equal access to be able to voice concerns, right? Shared voice, they found that the most effective teams are ones that you don't have one person monopolizing the call. People have an opportunity to share in on that. So virtually, right, that can become more difficult where you might have people that are are either more savvy technically, that they're more comfortable in this environment. So you miss out on an opportunity of somebody maybe sharing something because they don't want to speak up in this environment on a Zoom call or whatever the devices you're using. Are there strategies, things that you would think of that you would try and employ to help a manager or a leader make sure that everybody was contributing on a call? My guess is it would probably help to get away from people zoning out as well.
I agree. And utilizing group meetings, group calls solely is convenient. Set a meeting invite, create the agenda, get everybody on it. It's a very easy trap to fall into. I still think that nothing can replace the one-on-one conversations. So I really do hope every leader employs the concept of group meetings to share, to collect ideas, no question. The group meeting concept is never going to go away. However, supplement it with one-on-ones. If that's a follow-up, if it's an occasional one-on-one with your 6 team members instead of one group meeting with all of the 6, you can't underestimate the value of one-on-one meetings. Because again, to your point, Patrick, many people remain uncomfortable speaking up in a group setting. And to your other point, some people are still uncomfortable about the virtual meeting environment. They just have not acquired a comfort level. Many people have flourished. Many people turned on a dime and did great, but it's not for everybody. It's not everybody's cup of tea today. Yeah.
One of the strategies that I used for a group that I was coaching once was, and I could tell the first meeting, people didn't want to, they had things to say, but I think everybody was a little nervous about getting on the line, was to actually have assignments for individuals to have to speak about or present on. And that really helped almost prime the pump. It got the group engaged, and also it kept people alert to what was going, and again, I think that's another thing. Leaders today or managers today on these calls, where you might have been able to get away with a meeting that wasn't as structured, I think you have less ability to do that now, because again, people are just so exhausted by some of this technology that you need to, it's almost like it's like a performance to keep people engaged.
Absolutely. And there's an incredible quantity of leadership members who in the last 12 months have hired people, have onboarded them, introduced them to their team, got them up to speed, and guess what? They've never physically met the person. And again, it is an incredible challenge. It really is a true test of leadership. Each of them want to create the best possible teams. In these conditions, it's more challenging. It's caused the leader to work harder, to look closer, to make sure that they're providing, the guidance and the direction and the support for each of their team members. It has caused leaders to have to work harder. My hat's off to them, and I continue to hear good stories.
Yeah. So, Rich, you've had experience with such large organizations, right? Home Depot, Lowe's, Penske, a lot of expertise here. As hopefully we start to come out of this pandemic, things start to loosen up. If you were to pull out your crystal ball and look at, what do you think are the challenges that for organizations that are trying to transition back into maybe a more normal environment? How do you help them?
So my hope is that if they had a winning culture, a culture that worked for them, my hope is that they have not abandoned this great culture. Stay the course regarding the culture. So again, if it's collaborative, inclusive, innovative, whatever it is, stay the course. Don't ever forget what's made it successful, which is typically the employment culture, the company culture we've created. From a transitioning back to live, it is going to be a big transition to, in person. Some people will be resistant on coming back in person. They like this remote thing. They like being able to, start up the lawnmower at 5:15 in the afternoon on a Wednesday after walking downstairs from their home office versus commuting an hour home. And firing up that lawnmower at 6:15 p.m.
Yeah.
So I think my advice, meet with your team members, understand their needs by asking them. It makes sense to move back into a face-to-face environment, get their thoughts on how we can best do this, what's important to them, how leadership can help them. And I can tell you, it reminds me of Circuit City. Circuit City, several years before we went out of business, we increased the level of engagement by 10 points of a population of 44,000, really unheard of by American business standards. If you lift engagement by 1 or 2 points, you're a hero, but we lifted it 10 points. And the way we did that is we made a conscious effort to go to the front line team members and saying, what do you think? What are your thoughts? Help us understand what we should be considering. Going to the front line team members. It was an incredible shift from the proverbial top-down hierarchical environment. In this case, go to your team members. I think the best nuggets, the best piece of advice will come from your frontline team members on how to return back to the old regular.
Yeah. And what I heard you say early in that is, to me, there's a lot around having clear expectations. What is this going to look like? I mean, to me, it seems like for a lot of people, it's like learning to walk again, right? To go back into an office setting because they've been in another environment potentially for a year now. And now to go back into that, I think it's cautionary tale for managers or leaders not to just think like we pick up where we left off, right? That let's make sure that we understand what the expectations are going forward if this is going to be successful. One of the other things that I think I really like what you mentioned here too is really, if I'm hearing you right, it's talking about helping leaders understand from the follower's perspective, right? Rather than how to lead down, it's really to say, if you want to be most effective with those people that report to you, put on the follower hat, put on your employee's hat for a little bit and see what that's like. And you're probably going to be more effective in terms of getting them to go where you're asking them to go.
Absolutely. Walk a mile in your team members' shoes. Seek to understand, what their thoughts. The more people who are part of the solution, the better. Clearly, you're also going to make that team member feel more important. And that's many successful organizations have really improved their employee engagement by making people feel important. So I would tell you, I have many fond thoughts of working for the Penske organization. And I have to tell you, that is one thing that organization did incredibly well. They made the team members, they made everybody around them feel important. Sounds simple. How many companies can profess that they've done that? Again, my hat's off to the Penske organization. Very simple. They made it happen. But it also helps the team members, what I call line of sight. Team members need to understand where their duties fit into the company's overall objectives. And the more we can do that, the more we can make them feel important. They feel important, they're going to remain involved. They're going to produce. They're going to be part of the solution. So it's not rocket science, but helping people understand where they fit into the big picture of the company's overarching goals will reap dividends.
Yeah. And the things you talk about, it's simple, but it's not always easy. And I think that's the difference, right? We talk about a lot of things that on paper we present and you're like, this seems so simple, right? I mean, these concepts that we're going to talk about, not to confuse it with easy though. Changing behaviors and doing those kind of things is difficult at times. Obviously in our conversation right now, the things that you've talked about, you're a wealth of knowledge in this area, right? You've had decades of experience in this space. If people were wanting to reach out to you to hear more about what you do or can do for them, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Absolutely. Send me an email at rich.salon@hrsanity.com. It's rich.salon@hrsanity.com. Again, richsalon@hrsanity.com. Please reach out to me. Find me on LinkedIn. Just look for Rich Salon. Likely, if you type in Rich the HR guy, I'll probably come up first in search as well.
I love that. And as I said, as I look at your license plate behind you, I have to chuckle when I hear HR Sanity. It almost sounds like an oxymoron right now in terms of.
That's the name of our consulting firm. And
I love it.
Help organizations reduce the level of sanity within human resources and organizations.
And they need that. We need the sanity. So thank you for your time. I really have appreciated this and looking forward to our future conversations as both people in this space, professionals in the space, but also as Rotarians. So best of luck to you.
Patrick, this has been my pleasure, and it's great to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. Take care.
Podcasting from the beautiful state of Maine, welcome to another episode of the Learning from Leaders podcast, the show that focuses on identifying and developing the skills and behaviors that will inspire, empower, and compel others to follow your lead. Listen as Patrick's guests talk about the powerful leadership approaches they have identified and developed, which are vital for leading in today's challenging times. These are the same approaches that will positively impact you as a leader too. Learning from Leaders provides the right balance of leadership research with real-world scenarios, making it easy for you to rise above your best. All right, let's start the show. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Learning from Leaders podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please feel free to rate, review, and subscribe on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate that effort. Until next time, keep rising above your best as a leader.